quorum, I think, and we will check that with a roll call. We have to have a quorum for a meeting of the whole. So I have not heard from other counselors that are not going to be here. So we are going to proceed, and we will start with the, I am calling the March 17th, St. Patrick's Day meeting to order. We are following the governor's executive orders and allowing this virtual meeting format. We will go through the chair, and this is being recorded on WHCI and Comcast Channel 5 and Frontier Channel 1098. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, in liberty and justice for all. I'm sorry, I'm having a little audio. I also, before we go to, thank you, Mr. Dodge. Before we go to well, we'll start with roll call, Ms. LeBreau, sorry.
Ms. Blanks?
Present.
Ms. Cantor?
Here.
Mr. Davidoff?
Here.
Ms. Fay? Ms. Fay? I don't see Ms. Fay on the... Mr. Gold?
Present.
Ms. Kerrigan is absent. Mr. Sweeney?
Will be a couple minutes late. We'll circle back when he gets here.
And Mr. Winograd?
Here.
And Mr. Williams? Mr. Williams, I heard you. Thank you.
Here, yep. Thank you.
So Ms. Fay? I don't hear, so.
Okay, well, if anyone notices her, just text and we will get her on the record. Okay, before we go any further, I'm just going to, I'm getting some text, I'm sorry. I'm just going to first just say how heartbroken we are again to witness another act of hate and violence in our country, impacting a community that is just so brokenhearted. And we know that there have been a rise in anti-Asian and Pacific Islander crimes. We don't know the direct motivation for this crime, and these murders, but we do know that they impacted the Asian community so profoundly, and this is just again heartbreaking and really beyond what our country should be, and again very disturbing. As a poet and essayist, Cathay Park Hong writes, "The indignity of being Asian in this country has been underreported." And last week, President Biden condemned the vicious hate crimes against Asian Americans who have been attacked, harassed, blamed, and scapegoated. And we, again, our thoughts and prayers are with the families and the victims of this horrible crime, but also with every single one of our Asian American and Pacific Islander community members and around our town, our state, our country. And we're just, again, heartbroken. All right. I am actually going to designate the chair as I see Ms. Fay. Ms. Fay, want to stay here for the record?
Here. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we will also circle back with Mr. Sweeney when he gets here as well. Okay, so I am designating the chair, Leon Davidoff, to take over this committee of the whole, as Leon is the finance chair. So with that, Leon, the mute button is yours. Go through the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everyone. So thank you for all agreeing to review the budget like we did last year as a committee of the whole. I think it proved to be a good use of our time, and we were able to highlight those areas of concern, and we all could hear the different reasons and rationales as to why something was in the budget or was not in the budget. And we had a good explanation, and everybody was on the same footing. As we go through the budget review between now and budget adoption night, it is really imperative that members try to make themselves available for these meetings so that we don't have to spend a lot of time catching up. It is understandable that there may occasionally be conflicts in the next month or so with respect to scheduling, but if that's the case, if we could just let everyone know as to whether or not we're going to have a quorum so that the meeting can go forward. We do need at least 5 members to be present to conduct a meeting of this sort. So that I think it's, in terms of housekeeping, is important. Each of the sessions, we're going to go through multiple pages of the budget book. And I think in terms of being the most efficient, if we can go through several of the different segments of the departments, when we do the general government, if we can complete them all, hold our questions, and then we can go to council questions on those segments. And then as we move to different departments, as we wrap them up, we can go there. And then, like last year, I think there will be ample opportunity to discuss larger issues and concerns that members may have with respect to issues that are present. I'd like to reflect for the record that Mr. Sweeney just joined us. Do you want to say here for the record, Mr. Sweeney?
I'm here.
Okay. So we have 8 members of the council present. We do have a quorum. So if there's no objection to proceeding in that manner, that would be great. If any counselor has more in-depth questioning, obviously we can take that up, and nothing would preclude anyone from reaching out to the manager and or the finance director to get clarification on any of the items that are in the budget. So why don't we just start there? The first item is the general government. Mr. Hart, would it be you that would be presenting, or Mr. Privatera?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Mr. Privatera is going to take the lead on tonight's presentations, but I would like to make a few opening comments if I could.
Please proceed.
All right, thank you. And good evening, everyone, and thank you, council members and staff for joining us at tonight's budget workshop. As the Deputy Mayor explained, we do plan to review several sections of the budget this evening. Mr. Privatera is going to take the lead, really focusing on key changes to the extent we have them between the proposed budget and the budget that's currently in effect. We're going to start off with reviewing general government. We also invited several staff members here to assist with any questions that council members may have. So from general government, obviously, I am here. We have Ms. LeBreau, our town clerk. We also have Ms. Verano, Deputy Corporation Counsel. Our assessor actually has a conflict with a Board of Assessment Appeals meeting this evening, but we can assist with any questions he might receive. And then we're going to move on to other departments. From information technology, we do have Mr. Morin here this evening, our director. Obviously, Mr. Privatera for finance, Mr. Ledwith for human resources, Ms. Rubino Turco for leisure and social services, Ms. Waxman from the library, and Mr. Phillips from public works. The non-departmental section, Mr. Ledwith and Mr. Privatera can assist with questions there. So, hopefully, council members, you have your budget books handy. If not, the budget is posted online as well, and you can easily access it off of tonight's agenda. Those are the opening comments I wanted to make. Deputy Mayor would ask Mr. Privatera, after you recognize him, to go through the general government sections of the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. I also would like to welcome all the directors and town staffs for joining us this evening. We understand that it's your evening hours, and we do appreciate the time and effort you've put into the preparation of the budget. And I would be remiss without acknowledging that. With that said, Mr. Privatera, can you begin with the general government presentation?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a couple of comments first. The budget instructions that went out to all department directors were pretty simple. Keep your budgets flat. Only make adjustments where you know expenditures are going to increase whether it's contractual, whether we know a certain supply is going to increase. So what I'd like to do is give you a quick overview of significant changes on a department by department basis. And then, as you said, Mr. Chairman, if we want to circle back to any individual department, then we can certainly do a deeper dive. But with respect to general government, town council, the town council budget was relatively flat. The only adjustment that was made was an adjustment to the town clerk's salary. And the town council budget is up by 1.2% because of that adjustment. The town clerk's budget is down 2.4%, and that's basically due to a decrease in election expenses. You recall this year was a presidential election year. We don't have that level of expenditures next year. The town manager's budget is up 34.1%, or roughly a little over $136,000. The reason for that is the transfer of the economic development coordinator position from community development to the town manager's office, as well as the addition of $20,000 in part-time payroll for a part-time person to assist the economic development coordinator. And we added $10,000 for miscellaneous consulting services to the town manager's office. There were many points during this current fiscal year where the town manager needed some additional consulting help, but we didn't have any funding in place, so we added $10,000 to his budget, and those are the significant changes. Corporation counsel is up very slightly, less than 0.2%, or a little over $1,000. A couple of changes there. We hired a new assistant corporation counsel at a lower salary, and that was partially offset by increasing their special counsel account by $7,000. As you know, this year, the Corporation Counsel's office has been very active, and we wanted to make sure that if we could, we can buffer their special counsel account by adding some extra funding. So that account increased by $7,000. The Registrar of Voters office is down 7.1%, or a little under $20,000 again. That's due to election savings. The assessor's office is down 4.8%, or a little over $36,000. Now, in the assessor's office, we had one vacant appraiser 2 position that we did not fund. However, there was a part-time assessment analyst position. That position is being requested to be moved to full-time, and the part-time payroll is eliminated. So the assessor's office is up 1 position, but the savings is basically related to not funding an appraiser 2 position. Information technology, that's up roughly 6.7%. That's primarily due to the addition of a new information technology manager, and that expense is going to be split with the Board of Education. And in all these departments, if there were any merit increases that came due, we made those adjustments as well. And with respect to the technology manager position, I think we can all recognize that the additional workload that's been put in IT because of all of this virtual meeting and a lot of issues related to cybersecurity. So again, if there are any specific questions on any of those changes, we can divert back to the department, and the directors are here as well to answer anything specific. So that basically wraps it up for the general government departments.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. Before we go any further, Mayor Cantor and I would also like to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy St. Patrick's Day celebrations to be here this evening. And I'm certain that the way that we will try to run this meeting, there will be ample time to continue the celebrations before the evening gets long. So with respect to the things that you highlighted, Mr. Privatera, I think the common thread that struck out to me was the increase in positions, whether they be part-time or full-time I think you mentioned somebody in the town manager's office, an assistant to the economic development coordinator, the change in the assessor's office, as well as the information technology position. So do you want to expand on how many positions we're talking over this fiscal year, and is there a way that these things could not possibly happen in the upcoming year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to the town manager's office, that economic development coordinator position was just moved from community development to the town manager's office. It was not a total increase in the roster, as well as the part-time salary that we had in the budget this year in the revised budget. So the only change that was really made to the town manager's office was the addition of the $10,000 for the consulting services. The rest of the funds were previously identified in community development. Regarding the assessment technician, that was a part-time position. That position was responsible for discovering a significant amount of additional personal property and increased our taxes. Being a part-time position, the assessor asked if we can make it into a full-time position so more work can be put in that area of discovering more personal property. So the net difference was we had budgeted a part-time position. We had $25,000. I think the position is funded at $50,000. So the net increase was $25,000. But the assessor also agreed not to fund an assessor 2 technician, which is a higher level position. So, the result is a net savings. Even though we added a position to the roster, the result is a net savings. And with respect to the position in information technology, yes, that is a new position. I know that the director has been looking to increase his roster of positions for a while now. We were able to split that cost with the Board of Education. It is an important position given all the work that's been placed on his office. And I think that the town manager recognized that by adding it to his roster of positions. And if you need any specific detail on that, we can certainly go to Jared, Director Moore, and he can comment more on that. Thank you.
No, thank you. I just wanted to make certain that there seemed to be a common thread through your brief presentation on those various departments. I want to make certain everybody had clarification as to what was transpiring there. At this point, do any of my colleagues have any questions, comments on the departments from Town Council, Corporation Council, Town Clerk, Assessor, Information Technology, Town Manager? I'm not seeing any hands. If so, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I appreciate the question. Just to add a little detail to Mr. Privatera's comments, when looking at the movement from the movement of the economic development program from community development to the town manager's office, if you compare the budget for the town manager's office plus the community development administration from the current year to next year, you will see a net savings of approximately $141,000. And that is primarily attributable to the fact that next year we are planning to leave some number of full-time positions vacant in community development. We'll discuss that more next time around, but you will see a net savings there. The part-time position in economic development is a student intern position that we added this year and is proving to be a cost-effective way to support our economic development coordinator so that she can focus on higher level tasks. Mr. Privatera explained the movement in the assessor's office. Yes, we would be creating a new full-time position. However, we're offsetting that by leaving another full-time position vacant. So really the net increase here is half a position for information technology. Mr. Privatera has spoken to the importance of that, cybersecurity and other tasks. The Board of Ed would fund that position at 50%. Mr. Morin has been requesting this position for roughly 3 years now. And it just given the importance of information technology, the backbone of just about everything we're doing these days, I thought it was important to recommend it and include it in the proposed budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Matt, do you think you could just allude to a little bit more on, and maybe Jared too, about why this is so important to move forward with, just kind of more specifically, particularly on the economic development side of why this role is going to be necessary in the next year? I know that we've had we are really kind of blessed with all what's going on to have so much action going on in town, but I kind of want to hear a little bit about why these things are, what's going to be happening in the next year, and just talk a little bit more about what kind of actions they're going to be taking over the next calendar year, considering a lot of the economic development opportunities we have, plus obviously expanding a little bit on the role that the IT department will be playing with both the school and the town.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Hart.
Yeah, thank you, Matt Hart, Town Manager. I can start off, and then through you, Deputy Mayor, turn to Mr. Moran. So thank you for the question, Councilor Sweeney. With respect to economic development, again, this is just a move. It's moving the economic development coordinator from community development to my office, because she now reports directly to me as opposed to the director of community development. That's a change we made this year, and it's due largely to the fact my increased involvement in the area of economic development. It just makes more sense for her to report directly to me. Also this year, we did add a modest amount of funding, I think approximately $20,000, Peter can correct me if I'm wrong, for an economic development intern. And that position focuses on the more routine tasks, such as preparing information that we want to disseminate to the business community. Building our database of businesses, making sure that everything's up to date. You probably see a lot of the content that we produce for the business community. That position is really providing great support there. Also working to some extent with the Chamber of Commerce. With respect to the IT manager position, which is separate from economic development, I think Mr. Moran would be in the best position to speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. Moran.
Thank you, Chair. Director Moran here. Thank you, Matt. The genesis of this position really comes from cybersecurity. In fact, last week we had a meeting with the auditors from FM Global that strongly recommended we need a dedicated person that solely focuses on cybersecurity. They've seen it time and time again with municipal attacks. In fact, just yesterday we got an FBI flash briefing that K-12 public schools are under attack right now for ransomware. Like, they're targeting specifically government and public schools. So the more that we can just dedicate a position to really focus on cybersecurity, and then also help with all the projects we're doing. Every department's project uses technology right now, so they rely on IT. I have 4 people, which includes me, and I'm in meetings all day. So anything we can do would really help.
Just
Thank you, Mr. Moran. Mr. Sweeney.
just a follow up, Jared. Look, can you elaborate? I mean, I know that we all know that you've had a wild year, as we all have. But can you just kind of elaborate on like the hours that you're putting in your department right now, like in regards to the previous year?
Well, the ticket data speaks for itself. It's probably double. IT's kind of always a 24/7 shop. Like, I get calls from the police department in the middle of the night when things go wrong. But now with everyone telecommuting and at-home learning, which has now come back to normal as of today, we might get back into a sense of normalcy on the school side, but that could change. And we're trying to recoup our devices that were out in the field. We're dealing with damages. Luckily, I have a phenomenal internship team right now, which is great. And that's only because all the other programs are closed. The places they used to work in colleges and summer camps and things like that were closed. So I got this great team, but they're going to go back to their regular internships, and I'm going to lose them. So, the more we can do to just have like a permanent full-time, management team, so it's not just me, it's best for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Thank you, Mr. Train. Mr. Moore, I just have another question. So I understand under the American Rescue Plan, money is going to be dedicated for one area with respect to broadband. That was a broad category, so there's obviously more information to come. And we have spoken in the past about expanding community broadband opportunities for our residents, whether it be in the center, in Elmwood, in various neighborhoods and things like that. Would the addition of this individual allow you the capacity and the ability to expand broadband services to our residents in the next few years?
Thank you. Certainly much more quickly because it'd be one more person to help manage such a project. So yes.
Thank you. Ms. Blanks.
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor. And my question is for you, Mr. Moran. I believe I heard you say you have 4 people dedicated for IT. Is that split between the town and the board side?
That's just the town.
And I have a follow-up question through you, Deputy Mayor.
Sure, Ms. Blanks.
Can you give me an idea, Mr. Moran? I know your staff is working, you know, all types of crazy hours and whatnot, but based on the requests that come through, how quickly are you able to respond?
Mr. Moore.
Thank you. Right now, our average response time, depending on the ticket, it's in the budget book right now. I think we were about 1 to 2 days, and now we're about 3 to 5 days for average response time.
Anything further, Ms. Blanks?
Thank you. I'm all set, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions from any of my colleagues with respect to the particular departments we've reviewed? Seeing no further questions or comments at this point, Mr. Privatera, do you want to move on to the next section, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next department is financial services. Financial services is down 2.3%, or a little under $55,000. We had the retirement of an accounting manager, a person this fiscal year, a senior level position, supervisory position. What I decided was, rather than refilling a position at that level, we completed a reorganization of the department and basically reassigned some of the responsibilities of that manager to different individuals in the office and reclassified a couple of positions. And by doing that, we're able to save roughly $55,000 overall. So we still have the same number of positions in the office. We have, again, a couple of reclassifications that I spoke to the town manager about, simply because some of the duties and responsibilities of that position were moved over to other individuals in the office. No other changes other than our budget is down about $55,000 from the current year. Next department, human resources. The human resource department is up less than 1%, roughly $3,500. No changes in the department. The increase is due to some merit increases that were due to employees who were not at top step. Everything else in the department remained flat. Mr. Chairman, would you want me to do a quick overview of the risk management fund as well?
Yeah, I think that would be fine, Mr. Privatera, at this point.
Okay. Overall, the risk management fund is up about 1%, or a little over $260,000. Basically, in the individual breakdown, the individual components of the risk fund, the workers' compensation program expenses are down roughly 5.1%. And again, those are driven by claims. Health benefits program down less than 1%, again, driven by claims experience. Heart and hypertension is up about 12.8%. The self-insured program is down significantly. We basically we've made a recommendation that we reduce the reserve level for unreserved programs down to $1 million. I think we had it about at $1,250,000, but $1 million is an acceptable level. And the insured program is up a little over 18% due to premium increases and amortization of accumulated deficit. What happens is if we are hit with a big charge in one fiscal year, we'll basically amortize that over a 3-year period so we can flatten it out. I mean, all in all, I think we're in a good position. We're only up roughly $260,000 in the risk management fund. Sure. Next department, leisure and social services.
So before we go there, why don't we see if there's any questions, Mr. Privatera, on financial services, human resources, or the risk management fund? I think it's easier if we just take them in smaller chunks. This way people can focus in. Hopefully everyone's got their budget book and they've taken the time prior to the meeting to highlight or do things to the various items here. And if not, maybe for the next meeting, that might be a good approach to doing this. I know we're moving at a pretty rapid speed, but it's important that we all hear the same story. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Privatera, just sort of a broad-based question. I mean, the jumps in the departments that we're looking at this evening aren't large, and they seem primarily driven by just regular payroll increases. I think it's a large part of it, and some of them are declining, like in your area. I guess my question is, overall, what's the average percentage of the regular payroll increase in the general government area? It looks like it's around 3%. Am I off on that?
No. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Pete Privatera, Finance Director. I forgot to announce myself. I think for the most part, the only adjustments that we're making to payroll are step increases. For instance, if someone is not a top step, some of the union agreements state that they're entitled to step increases. The only contractual increase that we have in the overall budget is for fire personnel because they had the only contract that was in place at the time. Any other assumptions that we make for payroll are in the contingency account. But I would say that on a merit basis, it's roughly 2 to 3% on a step increase.
Okay.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah, just one follow-up for the public who's watching. I know we've been over this, but can you explain what a step increase is?
Certainly. When an employee is, sorry, Mr. Chairman, Pete Privatera, Finance Director. When an employee is hired, the employee is hired at a range, and in certain classifications, there are steps within that range. And let's say, for instance, the range is $50,000 to $65,000, and it has 7 steps. An employee is entitled to that step increase when they complete a certain period of time, and again, depending on any contract language, if there's an evaluation that needs to be done. But when we talk about step increases, they're different than contract settlements because contract settlements basically affect employees who are, at the top of the pay range, and also they do affect steps. But when contracts are not in place and people are not the top step, they are entitled to advance throughout their classification when they meet certain criteria and when they hit a certain period of time. It could be initially, it could be a 6-month for the first step increase. After that, it could be on an annual basis. Again, it depends on the contract. And Mr. Ledwith, if I misstated that, please correct me.
Got it perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwith. Any, Ms. Blanks?
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Privatera, you mentioned that a number of positions from your department or from this department was reclassified. What number of positions were those?
I believe we reclassified, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so I don't have to keep repeating. So I'll call on the person that asked the question, and then I'll call on the person to answer. So this way, people in the community can know who's speaking, and it will be a lot easier that way. Thank you, Mr. Privatera. Please proceed.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Pete Privatera, Finance Director. There's an accountant position, accountant one position that we reclassified to an accountant two because the individual was given more responsibilities that were originally a part of the accounting manager's area of responsibility. There was accounting assistant that we reclassified to an accounting specialist, again, because there were more responsibilities that were given to that position. And we did have a part-time senior staff assistant that we basically turned it into a full-time position and eliminated the part-time payroll. We did not increase the roster position. We basically swapped out the accounting manager for that senior staff assistant. So the purpose was I didn't want to hire another senior level management position. So we basically moved those responsibilities to other staff. And when those responsibilities fell outside their class, we had to reclassify them so they can do the work. And in essence, we saved roughly $55,000 by doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Anything further, Ms. Blanks?
No, I'm all set. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions from my colleagues? Mr. Goals.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you, I guess, to Mr. Privatera. You know, I guess the town, as we heard before, is receiving from the total of about $35 million from the American CARES Act. What, if any, I guess, COVID-related expenses or anything that can be attributed to is actually not being used in what we're already discussing so far, and then maybe other things down the road, so that we're not doubling up, and what can be slotted in or allocated towards certain things so that we can effectively look to have the budget reduced at some point.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Mr. Privatera.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right now, we're in the process of evaluating what we can and cannot use that money on. None of that $24 million is identified in this budget. I'm assuming as we move along through the budget process and we get further guidance that we will be able to use some of that money to offset the tax increase. And I know that Patty Lewis, the budget manager from my office, has been tracking all the COVID-related expenses that we've incurred, all of the lost revenue as it related to the pandemic, anything and everything related to COVID. We are going to be putting on a list and then performing an evaluation to see what we can and cannot do. For instance, an example in leisure services. Leisure services was virtually shut down. We lost a lot of revenue. That's on the list. The parking lot fund. We lost a tremendous amount of revenue in the parking lot fund because no one was using the parking garages because the offices were shut down. That's on the list. So I'm going to be sitting down in the very near future with the town manager and reviewing what we have on our list and comparing notes. And I've also reached out to the department directors and I've asked them to contact Patty Lewis directly to make sure that we did not miss any expenses that we can put on a list. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just ask the town manager if he'd have a couple of comments he'd like to make on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Matt Hart, Town Manager, and thank you, Councilor Gold, for your good question. Yes, to follow up on Mr. Privatera's explanation, when we were putting the proposed budget together, you know, we did wait a couple of days, but it really wasn't enough time, and we still haven't received the exact guidance we need that will inform us on the eligible uses of the American Rescue Act. We do, however, think that there will be great potential there, and we're certainly going to give you a series of recommendations that you could utilize to offset a potential tax increase for next year, but also above and beyond that, some recommendations as to very strategic investments that we can make over time. And I'm sure the council, there's going to be any number of key policy decisions here that you will need to make. And this funding will be available through the end of calendar year 2024. So I think whatever we recommend over the next month or so that might impact next year's budget, that's only going to be a portion of this sum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. To use one of the terms that our good mayor uses a lot, I'm certain that we will be strategic in our planning with respect to how we handle our finances, not only for this year, but for years going forward. I think it's fair to say that we all share your concern, Mr. Gold, as to the best way to evaluate the various uses or possible uses. But I do think that at this point in our discussion, it's a little premature to have identified them without getting the guidance from the Treasury as to what is allowed. But stay tuned, I think, is the message, because I do think that we're going to be on top of it. We're going to make certain that we do look at all these different things. So I do appreciate that inquiry, and I do share a lot of the same concerns. As we go through the budget, I think in the back of your mind, I think to keep that in focus, and probably write down areas that you may have identified as areas that uses possibly could be made, so that we don't leave any stone unturned. So thank you for the inquiry, and I think we're all on the same page here. Try to get the best bang for our buck with respect to this year's budget, as well as not creating, as is often said, one-time uses and holes for future budgets, which create bigger gaps going forward. But I do think, Mr. Gold, that we are all on the same page there, and thank you for raising it this evening. With that said, Mr. Privatera, would you want to go on to the next section? I think you said you were on to go to was leisure services, and I think once we complete the review of the leisure services, we can go around again to have council commentary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete Privatera, Finance Director. Leisure and Social Services was probably one of the two departments that experienced a significant increase. The department is up 11.3%, or roughly $317,000. That's due primarily to the fact that when the budget was adopted last year at the height of the pandemic, we made an assumption that a lot of programs were going to be closed. We didn't fund the aquatics program. We assumed that Elmwood, the programs were going to be closed. The senior centers were going to be closed. So this budget assumes that there will be programming. I think that in this budget, our assumption is probably 80% of the programs are going to come back. And if we are fortunate enough to be able to fully execute 100% of the programs, we can always come back to the council and ask for an additional appropriation based on the revenue that we receive. So even though this is up $317,000, a good portion of that is backed by revenue that we're booking from the programs. For instance, Elmwood Community Center and the senior centers, all the programs, all the expenses related to being fully operational have a significant amount of revenue that's going to be replaced. The only deviation from that in this budget is there was a social worker position. The individual retired. The individual was funded 50% by CDBG and 50% through the general fund. The reason was that individual was our point person on CDBG programming, and that person has since left, and another individual in in the department took over the responsibilities for CDBG, but that person already was 100% CDBG funded, which means that in order for us to fill that social worker position, we have to replace that 50% funding for that social worker. That's the only real operational change. And again, there have been a couple of minor tweaks here and there, but for all intents and purposes, this budget reflects the Leisure Services Department getting up to, I would estimate, around 80% capacity for next year. And as I said earlier, if there is an opportunity to open up earlier, I don't have any doubts that we would come back to council and ask for an appropriation based on the additional revenue we would get from the program. So that's what's happening in the Leisure and Social Services Department. With respect to the Leisure Services Fund, just a quick overview. Our expectation is that it will recover next year. There is an estimation that programming will be in effect. We will have an operational rink, cornerstone swimming center. We will have an operational golf course. Things will start to get back to normal. The only concern I have is that because everything was virtually shut down this fiscal year, the deficit in the Leisure Services Fund has grown. But other than that, I think it's going to be back to normal next year with the Program and Leisure Services Fund, and we are planning on having Celebrate in the spring of 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera.
Certainly, I was going to say if there are any questions related to that.
Are there any questions from my colleagues with respect to Leisure and Human Service, Social Services, and the Leisure Services Fund? Mr. Sweeney.
Peter, I think this question is probably more for Helen through you, Mr. Chair. One of the things, and we are talking about something that is not quite in front of us, but I do want to put it on folks' mind. It is pretty clear from everything that I have read, and I think this is probably stuff that you have seen, Mr. Hart, as well, that there is a significant emphasis in the federal dollars that are coming to municipalities for summer programming and recreation and learning loss. While we are probably not ready for that at the moment, I think it's something that we should be thinking about because it is going to be required. From what I see, I think it's 1% of the municipal funding is going to be required to be spent on summer programming of some sorts, whether that's incorporated into what you already have or additional programming. And I know that last year, Helen did a phenomenal job of really working on your toes and adapting to the environment. But I think that we should be prepared to potentially offer some additional services or look at partnering with groups that do have additional services in town for kids to get out there. Whether it is we're going to have to collaborate with the Board of Ed in some way, but it is clear that there's going to have to be some sort of activity, whether it's through the school or through the town, for children to remain somewhat connected to a classroom, but also in a fun environment. And I'm not sure how we kind of prepare for that, but just kind of wanted to talk about that, see if there's a way for us to potentially think about how we would build out for something like that in the very near future. Because I'm hearing that from all different conversations, particularly at the state level, that they're excited about that. But I'm excited about it because I thought Helen did an awesome job last year preparing for that, and I think that we're in a really good place if we wanted to expand upon that, whether it's at the library through Leisure Services. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there and kind of see if we are in a position to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Hart?
Yes, Matt Hart, Town Manager. I know that thank you for the good question, Councilor Sweeney. I know that Ms. Rubino Turco and her team are preparing for a very, very active summer, seeking to restore the vast majority of our programs, as well as what we can do additionally. And Mr. Chairman, I would ask that you call on Ms. Rubino Turco next, and she can elaborate in response to Councilor Sweeney's good question.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Ms. Rubino Turco.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Helen Rubino Turco, Director of Leisure Services and Social Services. And I just wanted to address some of the questions that Councilman Sweeney had about preparing for the summer. So we have already released our Leisure Services Summer Program Guide with our camps and our spring and summer programs. That brochure was printed and mailed to everyone, and we opened registration for the summer on February 1st, and we have had brisk response. Many programs are already filling up. Just as an example, today I got a video from the rink where they had 50 children in a Learn to Skate program today, 50. And it was at capacity. Already some of our summer programs are filled to capacity, and we're adding units to those programs. We constantly monitor what is coming down from the state in terms of the rules and regulations and the protocols that the state requires us to follow when we're running a program in the summer, and we will continue to do that. We do have many of our programs are back and will be in full swing. The one big change for Leisure Services in this summer is that we're going to contract with Health Fitness to run all four of our outdoor pools. And because they're a little bit more flexible, they can open one a little bit earlier than the rest of the pools. They can keep one open later in the season than the rest of the pools. And so we're excited about them stepping up a notch what our aquatics programming that we can offer. So that's just a couple of areas where we've already seen a very brisk response from our community about wanting to sign up for programs. And we're also thinking of new ways to meet that demand. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rubino Turco. Any further questions or commentary from my colleagues?
I just want, Mr.
Sweeney.
Chair, I just want to say thank you, Helen. My kids are one of the people that have quickly signed up for the programming, and their friends as well. So really appreciate the work that you guys are doing and the program that you're putting out there. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Anyone else? I have a question and concern. I know we speak a lot about leisure services with respect to summer camps and youth programming and things of that nature, but I think it's equally important to make certain that we stay in touch with our senior population. They have been the most isolated portion of our population. They're rule followers. They take it seriously when you say social distance, don't go out, don't do things. They've done that, okay? They have seen many in their population who were not so fortunate to live at home, not have such good results, who lived in assisted living or senior communities, unfortunately pass away. So they have seen that. They have experienced the isolation of not being able to be surrounded by friends and family, not be able to get that hug. As vaccinations are taking place, we're starting to see them be able to have more social interaction with their family members and other members of the community. So I'm sort of sensitive to that population, and I do think that they're probably, as we get closer to hopefully ending this pandemic, meeting the needs of those most affected in that age range, because it has just taken a very serious social toll on them. So hopefully, I'm looking at the budget. It's down. The revenues were down over 41%. We're anticipating. I don't think that's going to change rapidly, but should should things turn around, there will be, I anticipate, an increased need for transit services as well as ways to re-engage with our community. So if you could just, Ms. Rubino Turco, expand as to what we see on the horizon with respect to that particular population.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is Helen Rubino Turco, Director of Leisure Services and Social Services again. We do intend to reopen our senior centers as early as May 1st, gradually. We have a plan that we will be sharing with the Municipal Operations Recovery Team in the coming weeks. But first, it would be reopening the fitness centers on a reservation basis so that they can limit the number of people there at any given time. And then also to put up some tents outside so that they can begin to do some programming outdoors. What you may not know is that we have had a really strong connection with our seniors throughout the pandemic, with our members of the senior centers. So they have been telephoned. We have a whole system of outreach to our senior membership, senior center members. And they have bi-weekly an email that goes out full of free programs, virtual classes. Sometimes they're grab and goes. Well, they'll drive by and pick up an activity and a giveaway that doesn't cost us anything because it's been donated or it's been offset by a contribution from a local business. And so Gina Marino, who is the director now of both senior centers, has been spearheading this effort, and they're planning events all the time. One event that is ongoing that you might be interested in knowing about is they will get together and take a walk in a local park, and they all wear masks and they all stay distant, but there's a dozen or 15 of them who gather on a weekly basis and walk in their local park. It's a different park each week, weather permitting, but they've built this group, they take pictures, they post them. So it's really been nice to see that it all hasn't been lost for the year, but that Gina has a wonderful plan in place with many of the programmers that she has who have been offering programs for free this year. We'll begin to start charging for them again when we open the senior center because they can't, subsist on no revenue, these programmers. But you will find that they will have, I think, a robust lineup. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rubino Turco. It's really heartening to hear these kind of stories where they don't get a lot of press, but it's good to hear that these things are happening in our community. And I sort of wish that they did get more press. It would be good news to read, and I think we all could use a lot more good news. Mr. Gold had a question.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to Helen. I was looking at the golf course specifically as it relates to Rockledge. It looks like the rounds were pretty much flat for the year. If you go all the way back to 2017, where it was actually at its highest, the Rockledge course increases a percent by about 15, just over 15%. Can you expand on that and kind of identify why, if the rounds are about the same or less, or basically the same and flat, why is there an increase? And I know that we obviously changed our pro, so there's probably some savings there as well from what our previous professional was making. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Ms. Rubino Turco.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. To answer Mr. Gold's question, Rockledge and Buena Vista had an outstanding year in 2020. What you're looking at is a fiscal year, not a calendar year. So a lot of what I do in leisure services straddles that fiscal year. So it's hard sometimes to talk about, oh, we had a great year, but we're talking about 2020 fiscal. And even though we had a robust golfing program this summer, as you might remember, we were also closed for 8 weeks from the middle of March until the middle of May. And so we lost some significant revenue and rounds during that particular time when many of the other courses in the region were filled to capacity. That being said, we do have some new changes in the leisure, at Rockledge specifically, in the Leisure Services Fund. And I'm excited to tell you about it because with the Golf Pro retiring and a new pro coming in, we've been able to revamp the contract. And in the past, the Golf Pro owned the golf carts and took all the revenue in for golf carts and shared a percentage with us. And now we are going to lease the golf carts and we are going to collect that revenue and we are going to share a portion with the Golf Pro. And just to give you an idea of that shift, it's probably, and the same thing with the driving range. When you add those two together, the shift is probably going to bring us about $250,000. And that is something that, you know, we're really pleased to say. And what I mean by that is, if we take in all the revenue from the carts and we still have to pay the pro a portion of that because we want him to promote the carts, we want him to make sure that they're spick and span and overseeing them. We also have to pay the lease on the carts, and we also have to pay for the people that are going to be cleaning the carts and picking up the balls at the range and that kind of thing. Even if when we deduct all of that from what our ballpark revenue is, we would still achieve some significant revenue. And so that is a difference, and that's a big difference in how we're going to be managing our golf course this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubino, Turco. Anything further, Mr. Gall?
Just to be clear, though, through you, Deputy Mayor, the increase then is to accommodate, basically to make more money, is what you're saying, correct?
Ms. Rubino, Turco.
We're always looking at ways to increase revenue because it's in the Leisure Services Fund, so we operate it as a business. The rounds of golf are quite high this year. When we look at the season, we're almost at 40,000 rounds of golf. We haven't seen those numbers for about 5 years. Also, we've seen a very brisk an increase in interest at Buena Vista. It probably had its best year again in about 5 years. So we do see an increased interest in golf. We have already filled the adult intro to golf program that our new Golf Pro has offered for our spring programs. So we're asking him to add sessions to you know, meet the increased interest. And this is a great challenge for us to give a new pro is, okay, we had a fantastic year last year. It was a COVID year. How are you going to maintain that interest? And so he's really stepping up to help us meet that demand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubino. Anything further, Mr. Gold? Thank you, Mr. Gold. Anything further from any of my colleagues? Seeing nothing, Mr. Privatera, let's move on to library services.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The library budget is down 3.6%, or a little under $119,000. The budget is relatively flat. The only real change was there is a librarian 2 position that is underfunded. But you know, for all intents and purposes, library budget is flat.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. The library has done an amazing job during this entire COVID period. The comments I hear from residents is, I know where to get information, just call the library and somebody will get me the right answer. So thank you Ms. Waxman, and to your staff, we really do appreciate all the efforts of everyone involved in the library. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Just to add to Mr. Privatera's overview, I also wanted to state that another change for the library budget for next fiscal year is that the budget proposes that the director's position, Ms. Waxman is our acting director, and she's been doing a fabulous job. The budget for the director's position would be is cut roughly in half, and the budget assumes that that position would be filled for January 1st of 2022. Again, that's the library board's hire. That position does not report to me, but that's what the budget assumes. And I also want to add my thanks to the library for their great work supporting the organization and the community during this past year.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Do any of my colleagues have any questions on this portion of the budget? Seeing none, okay. We'll move on to the next item, Mr. Privatera, Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete Privatera, Finance Director, and thank you, Town Manager Hart, for picking up on that. The Public Works Department is increasing roughly 6.4%, or a little under $736,000. The primary components of that increase are $417,200 increase in tip fees for disposal of municipal solid waste and recycling materials. The larger share of that increase is basically due to the significant increase in the tipping fee for recycled material. We've also seen roughly a $47,000 increase on our contract with Paynes for picking up municipal solid waste. The price for the material that we use for snow removal clear lane is going up 5% next year. So John had asked for an increase of about $18,000. And if you recall, in the current year budget, we funded a new program in John's department where John contracts out for the management of parts services. That was funded for half a work year. That started in January. Next year's budget will annualize that. So there's $53,000 in John's budget to make that an annual contract. We've also increased the maintenance line item account by $44,500. And again, John's department is responsible for all fleet vehicles, but a good portion of that is also related to projected increase in the price of gas and fuel. If you recall, when we adopted the budget this year, we eliminated $24,000 for part-time payroll for grounds maintenance. This budget reinstates that $24,000. Though that was a part-time staff responsible to do summer mowing in the parks, so that's back in the budget. We did save some money on utilities. We're amortizing a prior year surplus, so we're able to knock down John's utility account by roughly $29,000. And we did not fund one vacant crew leader position, so there's one unfunded vacant crew leader position in John's budget. And again, you know, a number of smaller miscellaneous adjustments. There may have been some merit increases. We may have tweaked a few accounts here and there, but those are the significant changes in the Public Works budget for next year, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. I can take a personal privilege and ask a question. Last year was the first year that we did do the fleet parts management system, and I'd like to hear from Mr. Phillips as to his impression as to how it's working, why it was a good idea to move forward and continue the program. So, Mr. Phillips.
Through the chair, thank you, Deputy Mayor Davidoff. John Phillips, Director of Public Works. Great question. We started implementation of the NAPA program. It's an integrated business solution working with NAPA specifically. We started that integration in November. We were live before the holidays, so we're rolling into it really from January until now. But we are running under budget as projected, as we in the 3 months that we've been running it. It's still very early to realize the full benefits of it, but we are seeing a savings in reducing our parts cost by 5% in just this short time frame. We expect that to grow over time. One of the biggest challenges we had in Public Works was we had nobody managing our parts department. Our parts, a parts department, comprehensive parts department does accounts receivable, returns, rebates, scanning and checking the industry for the parts that we need to work on our equipment. That was primarily done by all our techs. And the industry, as it grows, they change with IT infrastructure. We are unable to keep up the speed that they change in the outside world. We were managing over 24 accounts throughout the region with various where we procure parts from. This brought everything streamlined it. We have one central location that does all our parts procurement through the NAPA program. Even before NAPA, 60% of our parts were bought from NAPA, so it made sense to go out and work with NAPA on this solution. So far, we're very happy with it. We've increased productivity by 10% of our techs on the floor, meaning they're getting more wrench time on their equipment that's failing and putting that time and effort into the equipment to get it back on the street, increasing our uptime because they're not having to chase their own parts and do all their own research, or literally sometimes even drive down the street to go pick something up. So far to date, we're very happy with the program.
Thank you for that response. Any further questions from any of my colleagues? Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Phillips, thanks for being here tonight. I just want to follow up on the increased costs in the recyclables, and even with respect to waste more generally. I know we've discussed it at the council table many times over the years, but just for the benefit of the public, can you explain why those costs are increasing exponentially in terms of some of the regulatory issues the town is facing and the interplay with the state's DEEP and how that impacts us in terms of the costs?
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for the question. Mr. Phillips.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Davidoff, Director Phillips. Very complex question, Councilman Williams. There's a lot of complexity to what you just asked. There's a lot of layers to it, and there's probably a lot to really deconstruct what you're asking. But I'll start with the two major components which you brought up, recycling and waste. I'll start with recycling. 2 years ago, we didn't pay anything to process the recycling to commodity markets. China, called the green sword, there's a couple other terms for it, pulled back on it. Basically, the world was bringing all the recyclables to China, and the contamination rate of those materials was really through the roof, almost disgusting in a lot of layers, where they were just really receiving trash and not recyclables. So they pushed back and shut their docks off to receive any of those materials. And so that trickled back to the states, United States, and had to find other markets to handle the recycled materials. And so there was no commodity anymore. There was no sale of it. You couldn't generate any money from any of the recyclables. Actually, most of the commodities were in the negative numbers. And the recycling facilities that we were bringing our materials for were eating those costs. So as contracts expired naturally and we go to renew, naturally they were going after processing fees. So we now pay a baseline processing for our recyclables of $84.64 a ton. So any ton we bring to a material handling facility, we pay that $84 a ton. That's baseline processing. If there is a market for the materials we're bringing them, if we bring them a high quality level of materials, meaning contamination rates are below 5% or near zero, they can sell those materials, and what they develop is an ARC, which is called the average recycling commodity. That ARC is either a negative or a positive. It's positive, we pay less than $84 a ton, so we get a give back, a rebate, if you would. If that ARC is in the negative, meaning they're still paying increased fees to get rid of the recyclables or process them out into the market, that negative number gets added to our $84 a ton. So we're using a $95 average because right now the commodities recyclables are not very strong. In most cases, they're very weak, and it's costing money there's an increased cost to recycle that material. On the waste side, we've heard it, we've talked about it, the waste crisis in Connecticut. I define the waste crisis as Connecticut can no longer handle its own waste. We don't have the capacity, and that capacity is shrinking to handle just the waste that Connecticut generates on the municipal solid waste stream. Those costs are increasing exponentially because we have plants that have closed and will be closing in the very near future. Increased cost of transportation to ship our waste to Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and down to the Carolinas. We have other facilities that are receiving waste in Connecticut that are aging and not receiving the capital investment they need. So they have increased breakdowns. They're not running as optimal or efficient as they should or could be. So that's driving up costs. So we expired our last contract and we renewed a new contract. And July 1st, we will go to $92 a ton for our waste with a 3% increase for a 3-year contract under the current contract we're under. So we'll go to $94 a ton, and then we'll jump up to $97 a ton before that contract expires. The market, the Greater Hartford market for waste is $105 a ton. That's the mirror price. They handle a third of the state's waste. It's actually $123 a ton, but they have a lot of subsidies that drives that cost down about $17 a ton. So that's, in a nutshell, those are the two major drivers in waste streams. They affect our budget directly. I hope that answers your question.
Anything further, Mr. Williams?
No, not at this time. Thank you, Mr. Phillips.
Anyone else have a question? I do have one follow-up. So, Mr. Phillips, do we currently still use Covanta for our waste processing? That's my question.
Yep, Director Phillips. Yes, we do. We still have our contract with Covanta. It expires June 30th of 2024. We've got a good relationship with Covanta. It's cooperative. They're handling our trash. We have consistency and continuity of movement of our waste to them. So we're very pleased with the contract to date.
Thank you for your response. Any further questions from any of my colleagues? Seeing none. The next item, Mr. Privatera, would be non-departmental expenses.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Pete Privatera, Finance Director. Would you like a quick overview of the parking fund before we move on, or do we just move on to non-departmental?
I think at this point we should just move on to non-departmental, because I think we'll probably talk about the parking fund when we do the special services district budget.
Thank you. I'd like to go down area by area on non-departmental. The probate court allocation remains flat. The general fund contingency reserve increases $830,000. The only reason the increase is so dramatic is, if you recall, we reduced contingency this year by $675,000 in hopes of getting union concessions when we finally settle. And I think we will recoup a good portion of that when we finally settle the outstanding labor agreements. The radio maintenance system line item is decreased only because the incumbent retired, and we're funding the salary at a very lower starting level. Private school health nurses, the increase is due to merit increases and benefits allocations. The non-public school transportation increase is based on a recommendation made by the Board of Education Transportation Coordinator. There's no new routes in there. Reval litigation remains flat. The health district payment reflects a 7.2% increase. And again, those increases are associated with rising costs to operations. And I think recently we approved a supplemental appropriation of slightly under $100,000 for the health district this year, so they can complete their operations. The employee benefits contribution increased by 4.3%. The biggest increase in employee benefits is the actuarially determined employer contribution on the town side. That alone is about $1.1 million. And finally, the MDC is down. Basically, they adopted a budget that was flat, but since the MDC their fiscal year is a calendar year and our fiscal year is a July to June year, we have a formula that we use to properly budget between both fiscal years. And based on that formula, we've seen roughly a $388,000, I believe, $700 decrease in the MDC. So those are the major changes in all the non-departmental accounts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. Do I have any of my colleagues have a Mr. Williams?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Privatera. On the MDC, why is there is our contribution less than it's been in past years? Because I know we've been in a ton of meetings discussing the MDC, and the projection has always been sort of an exponential growth, I think. So what's going on the MDC? Thank you.
Mr. Privatera.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete Privatera, Finance Director. When the MDC adopted their budget for the new fiscal year, they kept it flat with respect to the ad valorem. There was no increase to the ad valorem. And basically, the way we budget for the MDC, we have to straddle 2 fiscal years. Because it's flat for next fiscal year, we're able to see a savings. It's just a formula that we use so we can budget properly over 2 fiscal years when their fiscal year is different than ours. If you, Mr. Williams, just to kind of put it in perspective, if you went to the MDC budget and you looked at the ad valorem for the town, and then you went to our budget and you looked at the ad valorem we were budgeting, our number is always slightly higher than their number. It's just the way that we budget for it. It's not that we're budgeting more, it's just that we're straddling 2 fiscal years.
Anything further, Mr. Williams? No. Mayor Cantor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would like to have an opportunity, and I don't know if now is the time or we wait till the next meeting, to go through the health district's budget a little bit deeper, because they're, then obviously they had a lot, they were handling so much, but we had spent a lot of time talking about private school nursing and all the pieces of that, and I would like to spend a little more time on that, and I'm not sure if now's the time or we move that to another night. Back to through you, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Mayor Cantor. Mr. Privatera, are you prepared to do that this evening, or would you prefer to do that at the beginning of our next session?
Mr. Chairman, Pete Privatera, Finance Director. I would rather we wait till the next meeting so I can provide council members with the health department's line item budget, because what you have before you is a lump sum number. It might be better if you can see the changes in every individual line in their budget. It might provide some clarity to why they're asking for more funds in certain areas. Thank you.
If that's fine, Mayor Cantor, we'll take that approach. I would just ask Mr. Privatera that we receive the materials well in advance of the meeting so that we'd have time to review it to be better acquainted with the numbers and the items in the budget. Mr. Hart.
Matt Hart, Town Manager. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mayor, for your questions. We can certainly speak to this in more detail next time around. We did 2 years ago look in detail at the private school nursing program. I think in conclusion, or after the research we conducted at that point in time, we determined that our current methodology was appropriate, but I do want to confirm that with Corporation Counsel, and we'll report back to you. I do have the health district's budget in front of me, the line item detail, which we will share with you. And the increases primarily relate to additional resources in community health and public health, largely in response to the pandemic, but also to better prepare us for the future. But we'll provide more detail next time around.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mayor Cantor.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And along with some of the, I think the reimbursable costs, potentially FEMA, right, what claims and submissions that we're going to make too. It will be helpful, I think, for us to understand the impact. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Cantor. Any other commentary or questions from my colleagues on the non-departmental expenses and programs? Seeing none. I think the last item that was listed was other, but I don't know where I'd be looking in the budget book. Sorry, Mr. Hart, Mr. Privatera, for the other category. I have lots of pages here, but nothing titled other. So, Mr. Privatera, if you want to let me know if there's anything that I should be looking for specifically, or other comments that we might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete Privatera, Finance Director. I think that was put as a placeholder in case any other topics came up during our discussions tonight that we wanted to address, but I have no other category to report on.
Well, that's good to let everyone know that the other has no budgetary impact on our taxpayers. So that's really good to hear. And there's no page here that was produced at any cost to the taxpayer either, would reflect the other category. With that said, I'm glad we could end on that light note. If anyone has anything further to ask with respect to the items we went through this evening, this would be the time to ask. If not, I don't see any. I'd like to again thank all the town staff and directors for being present this evening. You have no idea how important it is, your attendance here. In case one of us had a question, I'm certain that you would have the right answer to provide us with accurate information. So I do appreciate all your time. And as I stated at the beginning of the meeting, we would move things along at a decent pace, and we were able to accomplish that. To my colleagues, prior to the next meeting, please review all the items that are in the budget, and feel free to reach out to either Mr. Privatera or Mr. Hart prior to the meeting if you have really detailed explanations necessary. So with that said, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Seeing that
Make a
everybody wanted
motion.
to jump at the gun
Make a
to
motion.
adjourn,
Motion.
I
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Is there a second? I heard lots of seconds, so we stand adjourned, and may everyone enjoy the remainder of the St. Patrick's Day celebration. Good night, everyone.